In a random room, a boy wakes up to the alarm on his phone. As he opens his eyes, he is startled. The entire room is painted with red scriptures. He wonders who could have written all that while he was asleep. However, strangely, the letters begin to disappear. He then thinks he must have been hallucinating because he just woke up. Weird how realistic it seemed. But then he looks to the side and notices the room he is in is not his room. Getting up, he wonders what kind of place this is. The instant noodles he ate and the 2 tissues he threw on the floor are no longer there. Obviously, he gets confused and starts to freak out. Suddenly, he seems to receive memories from another life, of someone who is identical to him. Moreover, both are orphans, but they followed different paths. Our protagonist studied all his life and got into an amazing university, but the guy whose body he took over dropped out of school and had a horrible job. Looking at his trembling hand, he wonders if he is in some other world. And what was the relation of those words written in blood on the ceiling? In the memories of the original owner of this body, there's nothing about that. He stands there, trying to understand the situation, when someone calls him husband and says it's time for breakfast. When he turns around, he sees a woman with large curves. Looking at her thighs, he wonders what this husband thing is about. In his parallel world, did he get married so early? She sits on the bed and tells him to get up, as it's getting late. Now the rascal already thinks that the transmigration wasn't so bad. He swallows hard, thinking that if it weren't for this transmigration, he would never have had such a beautiful and kind woman. She keeps calling him to have breakfast. He doesn't know whether to call her baby, wife, or darling. He then decides to delve into the memories to find her name, so it would be easier. He starts thinking and strangely finds nothing. His mind seems to split. No name, no experiences, no hobbies, no favorite position, nothing. There is absolutely nothing about her in his memory. He looks back hesitantly, realizing she is standing still. He already knows this so-called wife is strange. A fly lands on her eye. Hesitant, he asks who she is. She stands still for a second, then says that it seems he can already see. Opening a monstrous mouth, sweat and cold chills run down his spine. The protagonist says that he is just a little confused and will think about it properly. But by now, she has already turned into a giant creature, repeating that he can see. He cries for a second, but in the next, he is devoured. Suddenly, he wakes up in bed again, sweating cold and wondering what happened. He looks up, certain that everything was a dream, only to see the words in blood once again. He can't read them. The words disappear, and he thinks there might have been some kind of clue there. Staring at his own hand, he thinks he will have to pretend to be blind, but putting his hand on his head, he knows that in the memories of the owner of this body, he wasn't blind, so it makes no sense. He's a guy who always lived alone and never saw or heard anything out of the ordinary. That means he can't let this woman know that he can see her. For now, he will have to pretend she doesn't exist. A hand comes through the door and calls him, saying he just woke up and it's time for breakfast. Seductively, she approaches while he thinks he will have to ignore her and see how the former owner lived. She places the Dragon Balls and playfully asks if he is awake. Sweating cold, he knows he can't move and can't see, or else he will die. But suddenly, she turns her neck and approaches him while he insists to himself that he can't show any reaction. But she keeps getting closer, and suddenly her tongue comes out of her mouth. As it touches his face, he shows a reaction, and then she knows he can see. His face begins to be consumed, turned by a curse, and suddenly he explodes. In the next second, he opens his eyes and gets up, startled again. But now he's angry at that damned woman. The poor guy wakes up sweating cold and tries to stop and reason. He starts to wonder, is he being resurrected, or is this a time loop? Apparently, it's like when you save a point in a game. He grabs his phone, knowing she wanted to force him to show a reaction. He puts on TikTok videos of dancing e-girls to pretend he's distracted. Once again, she appears behind him and says it's time for breakfast. She calls for her husband and asks why he is looking at other women like that in front of her. He starts talking to himself, saying that he loves that girl from the live stream. Meanwhile, his wife asks if he doesn't like her anymore. She approaches and says she knows he doesn't have a vision problem. So why is the phone so close? Is he seeing her by any chance? He goes back to fiddling with his phone, wondering if he even can. It seems strange. However, he calms down a bit since she didn't show any reaction. He then goes back to looking for other live streams, but then he gets a scare. She appears live streaming on his phone. He stands up and throws the phone on the bed, scared as he trembles a bit. She's behind him, and as he turns, he sees her. She opens her monstrous mouth to eat him, but he tries to throw a punch. She dodges, and then there's nothing he can do. A bite to the arm, he agonizes and dies once again. While she feeds on the pieces, he wonders if that is really his remains. With that, he starts losing consciousness again. Once more, she says it's time for breakfast, and she approaches, startling him. Up to the 6th time he resurrected, he still got scared just by her getting close to his face. He died multiple times because he couldn't act very well. On the 8th time, he tried to escape from that room, but there was no way out. She realized that she could be seen, so he concluded that he should pretend to like her since there was no escape. As soon as she came to give breakfast, he said she was amazing. His plan was to take advantage of that as much as possible, but in the end, he went hungry and she ate everything. And so he died 13 times in a row while trying to find some way to calm down. Some people who go insane become very sane, but for him, death kept coming. It reached 14, 15, 16, and with each death, he received new memories of the owner of that body. He started to understand a bit about that world and how different it was from his world. This is a place full of bizarre tales. On the 18th death, he wondered why he was reliving it. Who wrote those words in blood, and why do they disappear as soon as he looked at them? Once again, he opens his eyes, wondering who is responsible for all this. He doesn't know who it is, but he knows his wife is one of them. She is a monster, and he began to repeat to himself that she should die because he deserved to live. Once again, she came through the door, calling him husband, and saying it was time for breakfast. He got up, milling that every time she comes to do this, she never forces physical contact. Standing in the door, she asked if he wanted to start the day by eating some hot, moist meat. He got extremely close, but he walked right through her. As expected, she could only do something where she was sure he could see. He wanted to prepare some food while she desperately stood by his side, insisting that she already made breakfast and was ready for him. The poor guy sighed, thinking that the more beautiful the lie, the better. She said it was ready, but clearly there was nothing prepared. He made a snack, knowing that only by leaving that room would he find something about his wife. When he went to take a bite of the snack, she had transformed into the floor, asking if he was seeing anything. He went to the door to open it, knowing he needed to get out of there. She was visible on the doorknob, asking where he was going and why he wouldn't stay home with her. But he just opened the door and left the room, saying to himself that no one kills him 18 times and gets away with it. Now he wants revenge. As soon as he finds a way to eliminate her, he will come back here. But as soon as he opens the apartment door, he gets a scare. Looking at the sky, the world is red and filled with deformed creatures. In front of him, only the silhouettes of people. He gets scared by that and starts laughing like a psychopath, saying that this world is really interesting. But he feels something strange and vomits on the sidewalk. Suddenly, someone appears, asking if the uncle is okay. He looks startled, and it's just a little girl wanting to know if he's sick. He tells her he's fine and that she can call him Big Brother. Patting her head, he thinks she's so cute that he would love to have a daughter, but she transforms instantly, saying he can see. His heart stops as he looks up. The girl has turned into a giant demon with a blade. Our protagonist is at a loss for words and then starts laughing loudly, saying that this world is very, very interesting. He likes it and tells her that he really likes this appearance because that way, when he kills her, he won't feel any guilt. He will end all the weirdos in this place without any remorse. But this time, he was torn to pieces. Once again, he wakes up in bed with the balloon wife asking if her husband is okay. The sun is already rising. The poor guy thinks that having breakfast 20 times in one day is really tiring. Sometime later, he is sitting on a park bench. Once again, the little girl comes and asks where her mother is. Can he take her home? While he's thinking about the madness and all the kinds of strangeness in this place, he realizes there are two types, the completely strange and irrational ones, who are aggressive but can't affect anything like air, and the other type, the creatures that are identical to humans who do nothing but try to get close to you.
As soon as they get a reaction, they make their move, just like that wife. He knows that no normal person in that world can perceive their existence, but even so, they cling to them. Why do they want that? He thinks that maybe these creatures want to integrate into human life. Sometime later, he is holding his phone and receives a payment of 3 cents. To survive in this world, he will need at least a bit of money to discover the things he needs. In the work group, a guy named Wu Dai is calling for him. The protagonist, Yizu Fangu, works selling apartments for a company and knows he hasn't received the commission for one he sold recently. So he sends a message saying he's going to settle that, and he speeds up on his bike. When he gets there, strangely, it's a hospital instead of the company's building. The place looks more like an abandoned building. He stands sweating at the door, wondering if this is the sales place. He reaches the door and his phone rings. He says he is coming up and asks if everyone is in the office. The people say yes, that the owner's son tried calling him several times, but he didn't answer. The protagonist says that's fine, then he will come up. He realizes that this place is definitely affected by reality, but the people on the call didn't seem to be doing badly. He finds it strange but also interesting. Walking down the corridor, he suddenly bumps into something. He feels he touched something soft and wonders what it was. He calmly reaches with his hand, wanting to know if that is the limit he can go, but what he touches are two magical spheres of clairvoyance that predict a pleasant future. The rascal blushes, and suddenly he feels something. A slap lands on his face. The girl appears, screaming that she will complain about him, and she runs toward the guard while he doesn't understand what is happening. When he looks up, it says B Academy, but as soon as he blinks, the place turns back into the abandoned hospital. He reaches toward a hospital wall, but strangely, his hand goes through. He realizes he can't interact with the physical form of it, and thinks that maybe it's like the creatures that need certain conditions. Once again, he passes his hand through the wall, and with that, he goes through it. He feels a bit dizzy and sees an abandoned corridor. Sometime later, he has already looked in several rooms, but they are all empty. However, in one of the doors, there is a strong smell of blood. Hesitant, he once again goes to pass through it. He ends up in a room where there seems to be a girl on the floor crying. He keeps looking, and she starts to get up. She looks at him, calling him Big Brother, but now he is resilient and ignores her, passing through the wall. As soon as he comes out on the other side, he faces another creature, but he keeps walking. Even the monster looks confused, and he realizes that there are dozens of strange things there. Every place he enters has a bunch of weird stuff, and the bizarre thing is that some rooms are open in a way that they could escape. Now he's getting good and doesn't show any reaction, all thanks to the dear wife who killed him 18 times. Suddenly, he sees some papers on the floor that talk about experiment number 128, which underwent a transformation. He crouches to pick them up, wondering if all the transformed are really human. Unfortunately, he can't even turn the page to know what's written since he doesn't belong to that world. Suddenly, something passes through him. He stands up, and it's the hair of a monster on the ceiling. She descends beside his face and asks why he is there. By any chance, is he looking to explore the mysteries of life with her? He ignores her, while thinking that maybe the best place to go is the director's office. The mental hospital building is the same one from the memory of the body's owner, which should have been a sales company, and the director's office is where the old staff room used to be. He decides to go upstairs to see if there's anything there. As he walks down the corridor, someone calls for Brother Sue and asks what he's doing there. Suddenly, a chubby guy appears, yelling at him, asking how he dares to come to work if he's already been fired. But Fangu walks down the corridor and pushes the two aside, thinking there's nothing on this floor. The guy with glasses looks confused, and the boss is cursing at him, asking why he's going to the second floor and telling the guy with glasses to stop him. But Fangu is already walking over there and finally finds the director's office. Someone yells for him to stop, but he's already got his hand on the doorknob. The friends behind him are freaking out, saying it's all over. But just by seeing the leg, you already know what's coming. Look at the waistline. Look at the little mouth. In fact, the colleague was already being squashed. The people ask who the protagonist is and what he's doing there, and he suddenly grabs her arm. She tells him to let go and asks what he's doing, but he just throws her aside, saying she's too noisy. She falls, and the guy goes to help her without doing anything, while Fangu finds a paper on the desk. As he expected, there's some kind of big secret in this mental hospital. The message says that if he wants to receive the gift of fate and uncover the secrets of this world, he has to go to room 520. He wonders if this letter was for him and leaves, wanting to know how they knew he was coming. It's in Building C, room 520. Suddenly, the lamp bursts. The friend with glasses is still following him, while the other three who stayed behind are saying they are scared. He turns on his phone, saying something is not right. The friend beside him says he's acting strange today. Why isn't he talking to anyone? He uses the phone to light up the second floor and realizes he's no longer in the mental hospital, but in the old company. The guy having fun asks the chubby one for his phone, who says it also has no signal. He tells him not to worry because with his status, he can access more than he imagines. But if he's not wrong, all these things point to them having entered a strange world. An entire place that was once a normal reality now seems to be suffering anomalies. The people who were working are still worried about not delivering the service. One of the building's guards asks if everything is okay and says he will take a look to see what happened. One of the girls crouches to pick up her phone and turns on the flashlight, but says it's too weak. The protagonist is there too. He turns on his and asks the guy with glasses why his light is also so low. People are questioning the blonde guy about what he said about them entering a strange world when suddenly he loses his temper and tells everyone to shut up, saying they need to stay calm because that's the only way they'll survive. People fall silent, seeing that he got stressed out of nowhere, and the guy explains that, in simple terms, they have entered a world full of ghosts. Basically, it's an alternate dimension where they live. People are silent for a second and ask about the guard. Who went to check the light? It's been 3 minutes, and he hasn't returned. Tang once again warns that in this world, you can't violate any ghost rules, or you'll die. The chubby guy, trembling, asks what they're going to do now. Then he replies that they urgently need to find a way to escape from there, or everyone in that place will die. The protagonist is sweating cold and hears a sound behind him. From the familiar sensation, he knows it's a ghost approaching. He warns everyone that one is about to arrive, but people tell him to stop joking because there's no ghost there. However, one of the girls gets grabbed by the hair while Fang Yuku watches. The people scream until he says that Sholi is already gone. The girl with glasses is scared, saying she must have walked away. She was right next to her and starts calling for her friend, telling her to say something. No one there can see anything properly due to the darkness. Wang asks the protagonist if he saw the ghost's appearance. He replies that, unfortunately, he couldn't see it since the girl disappeared suddenly. At this moment, everyone starts doubting Fang Yuku, saying that he's acting strange. Yu says that he doesn't seem afraid at all. Could he be a spiritual master? Confused, he asks what that is. The guy finds it strange that Fang Yuku doesn't know what a spiritual master is, but is too calm. His identity is in question. The guy explains that a spiritual master is someone who can control their spiritual energy, and in moments like these, they are the necessary people. Fang Yuku asks if the spiritual master thing is someone who learned it in the realm of the strange. If that's the case, he wants to know how to do it. Once again, Tang notices he's very calm and confident, so maybe he's the key to getting out of there. He then explains that to get out of that world, you need to gather the power of the ghosts. You need to meet 2 conditions simultaneously. The first is to go through the fear between life and death, simulating an emotional trauma, and the second is to come into contact with the ghost, to let its power invade your soul. But you must be cautious, since ghostly power is like a bloody garment. Even though it covers your body, it also stains your soul. Hearing these words makes Fang Yuku thoughtful, especially because he knows that after multiple deaths, he avoids contact with the ghosts to not die. From the wife to all the street creatures, they are mere illusions, as long as he doesn't interact with them. However, when a ghost crosses into reality, it can kill without the need to be seen, so maybe if he can contact them, he will be able to eliminate them. Fang Yuku wonders if this is a good thing. Remembering his wife, he says he's crazy to become a spiritual master and end her when suddenly another person from that place disappears. Tang starts to go crazy, telling everyone to shut up, or they'll attract more ghosts. Fifi approaches and asks what they are going to do. She's afraid of disappearing. Fang Yuku says it's 2 and 3 minutes precisely. For men, it's a 3-minute interval, and for women, it's 2. The guard disappeared 3 minutes later, the girl disappeared 2 minutes later, and the other guy disappeared. Following this logic, there are 3 minutes left for another one of them to vanish. He starts to leave, and the guys ask where he's going, if he's trying to get himself killed. Fang Yuku says they better start looking for a solution too, or everyone will die in that room. Suddenly, Tang points at him and tells him to stay still because no one is leaving that room. But the protagonist ignores him and says that, considering there are 8 of them, in 20 minutes there will be no one left. Fang Yuku looks back and warns that anyone who tries to stop him will die before the ghosts. Walking down the corridors, the friend with glasses asks why they never find the stairs, while Fang Yuku recognizes the lights as the same ones that were in the hospital. Suddenly, he realizes they are now back in the hospital. A friend asks if they are hallucinating because, as far as they remember, they were in the company. Why are they in the horror hospital now? Fang Yuku is now sure the company and the hospital are overlapping in this reality. The hospital swallowed the company. At this moment, they see a red pool. The entire corridor is dirty, and they recognize the uniforms there as being from the company. Fang Yuku concludes that the ghosts take 2 minutes with women and 3 with men, because that's the time it takes to eat each type of person. He says they still have some time, and the guy with glasses says that it seems they are still eating Geeling. The protagonist finds it strange because in the hospital, everyone was trapped, and the first time he passed through here, there wasn't all this blood in the corridors. The cuts on the clothes prove they are using some sharp blade, and he found only one like that. Something is coming out of the ceiling, and he remembers that the only one moving freely is the ghost doctor he saw right above him that time. They hear some sounds coming from that direction, and when they look, it's the group that was in the room coming to ask what they will do. They feel a bit awkward, and the chubby guy asks if they found anything by coming down there first. Suddenly they scream, and the girl says there's a lot of blood there. Everyone recognizes it as being from their allies' clothes, and Tang asks if everyone was eaten. Fearful, Fifi begs to leave, and Tang says they really need to get out. They asked Franku to lead the way, but he said nothing. After a moment of silence, he announced that the time had come. Fafi asked what kind of time he was talking about, and behind them, Har was descending. Hearing the sounds, they slowly turned around and saw the ghost doctor approaching from the ceiling. The second FY got scared. The creature got close to them, and everyone tried to run desperately, telling the monster to get away. But something stopped Tang. It was Fei, who had fallen, and was begging to be saved. Seeing the monster approaching, he slapped the girl, telling her to let go of him. Seeing everyone flee, Fangu remembered the moment he saw the doctor, and on the ground, Fi was begging not to be abandoned. But the creature was already holding her by the hair. With tears in her eyes, Fi begged, but the lights went out, and it rained blood in that place. The friend with glasses was shocked to see that Fifi was dead, and the monster didn't stop. It continued to strike her multiple times. Fangu noticed that her scalpel techniques were extremely advanced, so she probably practiced a lot. He and his friend were standing there, but the creature didn't seem to be paying attention. 2 surgeries at the same time would be almost impossible. The monster put away the scalpel and opened her mouth to eat Fi. Fangu understood that the instinct to eat humans was just because she had turned into a ghost. He started to approach, and his friend asked what he was doing next to the monster fearlessly. Fangu punched her in the face, but he was startled. Her skin felt as hard as steel. He remembered that all the creatures he had encountered were extremely powerful compared to humans. The only way to change this situation was to become a spiritual master. The friend called for him, saying they needed to run away, but Afangu said it was okay because that creature only killed one person at a time. That meant when she was eating, it was the safest moment of all. The friend said that soon the monster would finish, but the protagonist said that Fi had an extra round piece of flesh that would make it take a little longer. The friend, upon hearing that, vomited while Fangu remembered that he needed to absorb cursed energy from the creatures. In a dimension like this, near the ghosts was where the most concentrated power was. Physical touch would be the best way. Seeing the ghost's thighs, he patted them to see if he got infected. The monster's legs were inverted, and Fangu was patting them. The friend told him to wake up, that it wasn't the time for this kind of thing, but Fangu just said that if he was scared, he could run away. The guy said it was okay, and if so, this should go all out. He got closer to the protagonist to touch the ghost's legs, but soon realized they were very cold. While patting, the friend said nothing had changed, and Fangu said they would continue. The friend said he never thought the first contact would be with a ghost, but these legs were really too long. The protagonist began to think that this guy had some hidden potential since before he was dying of fear, but now he was ruling. He announced that a minute had passed. They would bother her for another 30 seconds and then run immediately. As soon as the clock hit 1:30 on the phone, he stood up, saying it was time to flee. The friend asked if they could really escape and where he was going. Fangu was sure where he was going, as he had observed the hospital very well when he walked around, and they would use the terrain advantage to create a distance from the doctor. But Harir appeared in front of him. He wondered if he miscalculated and how she had finished eating so quickly. The amount of flesh Fifi had was enough. Then he noticed 2 silicone implants on the floor. Everything was fake, and now the ghost was behind him. She made a cut right on his neck, and with that, the boy's screen went dark. After his head rolled through the air, he opened his eyes again, finding himself back in the moment with the monster. Right when his friend mentioned how cold it was, Fangu realized that the time loop seemed to be triggered by specific events. Or perhaps it was like a game where you had to clear levels and some progress was saved. His friend was having fun, but Fangu knew that last time he had died because of the silicone, so he couldn't afford to make the same mistake. He quickly grabbed the boy and urged him to leave, but the friend, drooling, insisted that this was the first time they could stay a bit longer. Fangu warned him that everything around them was silicone, and if they didn't run now, they would both die. The friend was shocked, now understanding why the area was so large. They began fleeing down the stairs, encountering others who were also descending. The desperate crowd started running faster than them, but Fangu grabbed the handrail and threw himself in front of everyone. A chubby guy thought Fangu was a ghost and asked him not to scare him. Another guy with glasses questioned why everyone was moving so slowly. The chubby guy explained that they had already descended 20 floors, but Shia How argued that it was impossible since he and Fangu had only descended 3 floors to catch up. The crowd told him to be quiet and stop lying, but T realized that the ghost was creating false paths. He lamented that monsters like this could create illusions that trapped people. Fangu observed the discussion thoughtfully, then approached and instructed everyone to drop any spare items on the floor to mark their way. The group complied, dropping everything they had. Then Fangu urged them to continue down the stairs quickly. They eventually found their dropped items again. While others recognized their belongings, Fangu was intrigued by a small shirt. Suddenly, Tang shouted that only a spiritualist could see the exit. He urged everyone to activate their powers and try to see something. Tang clasped his hands, hoping that their previous experiences might help them escape. The people were confused and unsure how to proceed. They began attempting to use their powers while Fangu kept his focus on the stairs. He remembered that the exits from these corridors were typically on the right side, so he assumed it would be similar here. Tang asked what Fangu was doing. Fangu replied that he wasn't interested in praying. He was focused on finding clues to escape. Hao was impressed by Fangu's calm demeanor, while Tang noted that Fangu hadn't hesitated even when the monster appeared. It was strange that they had found themselves fleeing down the stairs again, and both had spent at least a minute with the monster in the corridor. So what happened? The psycho speculated that they might be taking advantage of the ghost, which made sense, but seemed unlikely. Fortunately, Fangu was touching a wall and counting, mentioning numbers like 10, 12, 15. He finally declared that he had found it. His friend was amazed that there was actually a door, and Tang came running, asking if they had really found it. The problem was how to open it. Fangu imagined where the lock might be and moved his hand in the void, which opened the door and released a burst of energy. Fangu was about to be the first to enter, but Tang shoved past him, running out and declaring they were finally saved. Everyone rushed past him, desperately trying to escape. Hao questioned why Fangu was letting everyone go ahead and why he remained so calm. Fangu knew that facing that creature didn't warrant rushing. His plan was to see who would get caught first, hoping that the ghost would stop and give him a chance to increase his spiritual power. The crowd continued to flee until they were forced to choose between 2 paths. This created a divergence, with everyone wanting others to go ahead to test the paths. Tang once again asked Fangu what they should do if they found an iron door. He must know the way out. Fangu wasn't keen on helping the group. They kept pushing and expecting him to sacrifice himself. With the ghost doctor approaching, everyone was shouting at him to speak up quickly. Fangu, however, was indifferent to their pleas, seeing them all merely as tools. At that moment, with the ghost doctor being invincible, his job was to buy time. As he went down the right path, he contemplated that escaping would likely require sacrifices. The group saw him choose that path and began to flee in panic. A hand could be heard approaching from behind. The chubby guy was the last to run, and Fangu knew the ghost was closing in. As the ghost's hair reached out toward the chubby guy, who was now in a panic, Fangu decided to intervene. He grabbed the panicking chubby guy by the collar and threw him back, causing him to fall to the ground. The chubby guy screamed, but before anyone could react, something slashed his neck, splattering blood on the walls. Fangu observed this with a cold detachment, noting that the ghost was now as crazed as he was. Needing to increase his own spiritual power, Fangu faced the ghost again. The sickly friend, now more poetically inclined, approached him and expressed a desire to join in the effort to escape. Fangu, recognizing the potential for this sickly friend to awaken spiritual power, agreed to work together. Later, while fleeing once more, Fangu asked the sickly friend if he was afraid of dying. The friend replied that waiting for death was worse than dying itself, and he trusted Fangu because he was there with him. They eventually reached the cafeteria, where everyone was starving and thirsty after their long escape. Tang began grabbing food, planning to distribute it later. The chubby guy approached and asked for some, But a girl suddenly announced that she found something. It was a door. As Fangu examined it, he realized they might be saved. However, when they opened it, they found another door at the end of the corridor, and the light beyond was dimmer than before. As they opened this second door, they found only a utility room. This was the end of their chosen path. To return, they would need to wait for someone to die and distract the ghost doctor. The protagonist decided to go back in search of the ghost, despite the group's anger for his choice. Fangu was not pleased with their complaints, since he had not asked anyone to follow him. Hao, in response, suggested that everyone do as they wished, acknowledging that Fangu hadn't forced anyone to follow him. A chubby guy complained about Fangu's decision-making, saying it seemed he chose without knowing anything. Tang tried to calm the group, emphasizing that survival was the priority. He pointed out that the ghost attacked one person at a time and rested for 2 to 3 minutes, suggesting they choose someone as a distraction to create an escape opportunity. Tang immediately understood the plan and hit Fangu in the chest, declaring that if it weren't for him, no one would be there, so he should be the one to pay for their sins. Hao questioned Tang's actions, but Tang shouted for everyone to help. Fangu, however, intervened and put Tang in a chokehold. As he subdued Tang, he called the chubby guy to help him, now putting Hao in a chokehold as well. The door slammed shut, isolating Fangu outside. The group, confused, asked Fangu what he was doing. Fangu coldly remarked that he never imagined he'd be so interested in people. They were stranger than ghosts. He thanked them for their interest, but warned that they would pay next time. With that, he died once more, his body falling to the ground. The group opened the door to escape, and Hao, with tears in his eyes, went to help Fangu. As Tang looked back with a smile, he saw something chilling. Even in death, Fangu was smiling, telling Tang to wait a little longer. As they ran down the stairs, Fangu, now smiling in a macabre way, continued to descend, ignoring everyone's calls and fears of the approaching ghost. Fangu's steps echoed as he approached the door, his stride confident despite the eerie surroundings. He reached out and opened the door without hesitation, a gesture that surprised everyone around him. Tang, always quick to speculate, asked if Fangu had awakened his spiritual powers. Fangu, however, dismissed the question with a nonchalant shrug. He then issued a warning. They had just 1 minute before the ghost would appear. Tang, sensing an opportunity, grinned and offered Fangu a deal. If he helped them escape, he would be rewarded with 5 million. But Fangu's smile widened as he replied, "There's no need to rush. I have something to take care of before we leave." His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the urgency of their situation, leaving Tang and the rest puzzled by his cryptic words. As Tang was about to ask Fangu another question, he suddenly felt a sharp pain. Fangu had kicked him in the groin, and Tang crumpled to the floor, groaning in agony. "You should use that 5 million to treat that pain," Fangu said with a cold, detached tone. Tang, still writhing in pain, offered to pay even more if only Fangu would ask. But Fangu remained indifferent. The rest of the group erupted in curses, furious at what they saw as a cruel and unnecessary act. Fangu, unbothered by their anger, calmly warned them that escaping the ghost was impossible due to its speed. With Tang incapacitated, Fangu declared that everyone else was now safe. The group, confused by this notion of being saved, were stunned into silence. Their confusion turned to shock when another kick landed, this time on a chubby member of the group, who also ended up writhing on the floor. "You should have died a long time ago," Fangu remarked coldly. The group, now alarmed, demanded to know if Fangu had gone mad and if he intended to do the same to everyone. Fangu reassured them that he would not, as he needed at least one person left. H, a friend in the group, commented that it was a good plan, but the others began to question Fangu's humanity. Fangu pointed in a direction and urged them to hurry, but the group grew suspicious when he didn't lead the way. "I'll just stay here and touch some thighs," Fangu said nonchalantly. The group was bewildered by this statement, and the psychopath friend in their midst remarked with a grin that Fangu definitely seemed to want to stay behind. As the Dr. Ghost approached once again, the group resumed fleeing, but paused behind a wall to observe what would happen. Fangu lay on the ground, watching as the monster drew nearer. Tang, in agony from Fangu's earlier kick, realized his pants were wet from internal bleeding. Desperate, he clutched at his legs and begged, "We'll die together." Fangu, unmoved, stepped on Tang's hand and replied, "Don't worry, I'll stay right here with you, watching you die." The ghost seized Tang by the neck, and soon he was gone. Blood splattered across Fangu's face, which he licked with disturbing satisfaction. "The taste of revenge isn't so bad," he remarked with a twisted grin. In the midst of his grim satisfaction, Fangu felt an unusual sensation in his chest, his heart pounding rapidly. He heard his wife's voice calling out to him, and perversely thought it would be amazing to see her torn apart just like Tang. Fangu began advancing toward the ghosts, causing the group to wonder if this was part of his plan. He remembered that Hao had called out to him at the moment of his death and extended an invitation for his friend to join him. Hug seemed reluctant, and the others labeled him a ghost. Realizing that his numerous deaths and the madness he had experienced had left him devoid of emotional fluctuations, Fangu recognized that his humanity was slipping away. He and Xia Hao were becoming nearly unrecognizable from who they once were. However, he chose not to force his friend into this madness. Suddenly, Z approached Fangu, declaring that he was the only person he could truly trust in the company. "You're my only true friend," Z said, though he noted that Fangu looked frightening with blood smeared across his face. Despite this, Z blushed as he stepped forward to activate more spiritual power. As the cold energy began to invade Fangu's body, he tried to sense its path. It felt as if the cold was concentrating in his brain and heart, turning them into blocks of ice. A cold blade sliced through his entire body, and after being shattered, a brilliant light emerged from his chest, forming a red sphere. Upon regaining consciousness, Fangu noticed that his senses had become extraordinarily sharp. His thinking speed and control over his body had improved, as if he had access to new dimensions of perception. However, he realized that he had only awakened less than 1% of his spiritual capacity. This new ability seemed connected to the intense desire he had felt. As he pondered what this ability could be, he suddenly experienced a sharp shock his heart was in agony as he wondered if his ability was to cause pain. The sequence of deaths made his greatest desire to return that sensation, whether it was negative emotions, mind distortions, or pain. He could make enemies experience all of it. Out of nowhere, he smiled and started laughing, saying that now he was incredible with this ability. Seeing him go crazy, Hao asked if it had worked, while Fangu concluded that he had received the best possible ability for him. Remembering his dear wife, he stood in a trance while Hao-less. Hao called for him, saying that 2 minutes had passed. But Fangu just told him to step aside as he was going to test his power immediately. Hao stepped back, saying it seemed to have worked, and that was very good. Fangu approached the ghost doctor, concentrating the power in his hand. He knew that it carried everything he had experienced in those days. He knew that the more times he died, the more pain he would accumulate, and the stronger he would become. As long as he continued being revived, he could infinitely strengthen himself. He punched the ghost in the face, saying he wanted her to experience this masterpiece. The punch hit her squarely, but the power seemed to dissipate. She was thrown back and dropped the scalpel while crying on the floor. But Fangu immediately realized that his punch was mediocre, and the little spirituality he had was now exhausted. The blow hadn't hurt the ghost, and she didn't seem to have felt the pain he did. While he thought about this, he said maybe it was time to run away, or they could go back to touching again. He thought that maybe putting this energy into weapons would be the best way. And speaking of weapons, there was one right on the ground for him to use. He grabbed a pickaxe, but soon felt an energy that made the blade seem impossible to lift, and its power immediately attacked Fangu's heart. He could see all the times that weapon had been used, the infinite amount of pain it had absorbed. With so much resentment, he wondered if he could use it to end the doctor. He told Hao to step aside, and as soon as he did, he attacked the doctor right on the back of the neck. But it did nothing. Hao pulled out her shirt and said it didn't even leave a scratch. How were they going to kill her like this? The friend kept patting her back, and Fangu concluded that without spiritual power, it wouldn't work. At that moment, he understood that revenge was not possible right now. She was getting up, and he was driving Hao, saying it was time to run. As soon as the monster got up, she wondered where the scalpel was, walking with Hao. He sensed someone's presence with his sharpened senses. He could perceive the presence of others. Hao asked where they were going when the two who had been hiding appeared. Hao called them cowards for running away and now coming back to ask for help, but Fangu said there was only one solution. They would have to go through each of the 4 doors. Everyone was scared, and the guy said that with a monster following them, they only had time to try one. Fangu ignored them and walked away, saying he wasn't forcing anyone to follow him. As soon as they heard a sound behind them, they knew she was getting closer. Fangu realized that by stealing the scalpel, the ghost's behavior would change. He opened the door and told everyone to run. They started climbing the stairs, and in desperation, as soon as they closed the door, it was destroyed from behind, and the ghost began to ascend the corridor with a mad face. She told him to give it back. She ignored everyone on the stairs and went face to face with Fangu, telling him to hand over the scalpel. Fangu managed to defend himself when she attacked, but then she opened her mouth and went for his neck. At the east gate, they died and went to another room. This time, he ended up cornering the chubby guy in another place. Once again, he stole the scalpel and headed in another direction, smiling. They ran to the north gate and reached the elevator, but as soon as he tried to enter, the monster opened the door and finished him off. Then he tried the south gate, but once again, he was caught by the malicious and flexible ghost. Really cruel. Since he died, he tried the last door. He didn't want to accept that by stealing the scalpel, he would always die, even though she was extremely fast.